Hello and welcome to our now 19th Communication Zoom talks. Um, Hartmut and I are happy that we again have a guest with us. So thank you for joining us, Melanie Forbrick, Head of Global Brand Engagement and Societal Engagement at Siemens Energy. Hello to Florida.
Hello to Germany. Thank you for having me, Mark and Hartman. I'm excited to be here and to share with you what we've been working on.
Yeah, and you had tasks that are enough. Each one of them would be enough to try to get along with them. So one of them was build a new brand for a new company, Siemens Energy, which is a spin-off of Siemens AG. And since you obviously did not have to do enough in March in March 20, COVID hit you as all the others. So while trying to stabilize a company, giving a company a profile, a new brand, you and of course all the other colleagues at Siemens Energy had to cope with all the challenges of the virus. So um, looking back at that, what do you think? What were your feelings in the beginning, and what do you think now?
Well, I've given this a lot of thought because, you have to reflect back on 20 months or 22 months of kind of getting ready to do this. And it was already a pretty tall task for us. We were told from the very beginning that the time frame we had to launch the company in general was pretty aggressive. And then we have a pandemic that hits in March. And we had been pulling a team together that some of us had a fair amount of branding experience. Some of us had none. None of us had launched a brand new brand from scratch. We had done some rebranding or some pretty big projects, but never completely launched a new brand. So we were already sort of a little, sort of overwhelmed. But we knew from the very beginning that we had to define a really clear purpose for who we wanted to be as a brand, taking the legacy of Siemens with us, but carving out a new legacy of our own. And we had done a lot of that work prior to March. So really starting from March, it was about activating and really getting the assets and the campaign
Okay.
and bringing that to life. And so that's really where, because there was so many tasks, we just kind of define, like good project management, really define clear work packages, clear roles and responsibilities, stayed in regular contact with one another. Some of us, by the way, had never met each other in person because we had only, sort of brought the Siemens colleagues into the Siemens, the former gas and power part of the company, and some of us had never met each other. So it was really like a sort of a tricky task to bring a team and create a team environment under those
Yeah, and
circumstances.
this completely virtually because with you being on one and people being on one side of the ocean and the others in Germany and others somewhere else, there was literally no chance to meet in person, right?
There was no chance at all. So what we did though, and one of the reasons I think we were pretty successful is, as soon as they let us turn the cameras on, because not everybody knew what bandwidth we would really have as a company, but as soon as we let us turn the cameras on, we turned the cameras on. And in some ways, when you're in people's living rooms or in their home offices or at their dining room tables, there's something really intimate about that. And I think we were able to form a team bond quite early individually. We did some team building virtually to try to enhance that. And we shared with each other at Christmas time our decorations in our houses and things like that. So
Cool.
we really tried to foster a team environment so that we would
Yeah,
be able to support one another under these strange circumstances.
yeah. I've heard that now quite a few times that being so distant and having the need to talk via cameras, ironically, uh, there were more intimate insights into each other's lives than any time before. Yeah.
Yeah,
With
I think,
looking into the living rooms and wherever
yeah,
they were
kids running
sitting.
in the background. Yeah, kids running in the background, dogs barking. Oh, what kind of dog do you have? Oh, what is that behind you? Is that a picture of your family? You know, I mean, just things like that that wouldn't happen. I mean, even if you meet in a conference room, it doesn't feel as close as you and I and Hartmut feel now.
Mm.
And yet we're 5,000 miles apart from each other. So there were some things that were really beneficial around being virtual that I think helped us as a team. So just a few weeks ago, we got together for the very first time as a team, having again some of us meeting each other for the very first time, and it was wonderful. But we literally were able to just pick up. We were so well bonded already that we just were. It felt very familiar. It felt really great to be together, I will admit, but it was also really easy too. So
So did that intimacy, having the insight into the flats and into the houses, did that help to create a kind of trustful relationship?
I would definitely say so. Yes, there were, and again, I would say, again, another sort of, if you have to look for the bright side or the silver lining of the pandemic, we couldn't do anything else, right? So we weren't going on vacation, we weren't going out to dinner, there were no family activities. My son graduated from college while and we sat on the couch and watched a virtual ceremony, right? So we were
Yeah.
in the house 24 hours a day for the most part. So we had a lot of time on our hands and we had spent a lot of time together. So there were a lot of opportunities to talk one-on-one, to talk in small groups, to talk as a full team. And I think that just fosters trust in a very natural way. And again, having clear, defined roles and responsibilities, and over time getting those accomplished, we also grew to trust each other, not just in sort of the esoteric way, but in our work and in accomplishing real work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's also a topic actually Mark and I, we talked about quite a lot, creating this trust in this virtual environment. And what I've also seen in recent projects, actually also during the pandemic, working with different companies, that a lot of people use this time actually also to reflect more, interestingly. And this topic of purpose, I think it came up in all the projects I worked on recently, also from a very individual perspective, that people started to think, so what's my connection actually to the company? And by collaborating in such a more focused way, maybe in this virtual environment, and at the same time, this need to reflect more came up with many
Yes.
people. I also wouldn't have expected before, and even if it was not planned in the projects, people started to talk about it and wanted to know more about it. Is this also something you experienced in your process?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think we saw it. We actually also had a lot of tragedy in our team. People who lost their mothers, people whose husbands were diagnosed with cancer. Um, my own step granddaughter was diagnosed with leukemia. So we also had some really tragic moments that we shared with one another because we were going to need to support each other while people took a break or needed to go through funerals or help a spouse in the hospital or whatever. So for whatever reason, that really caused both personal reflection, but also team reflection on being able to be a real team and back each other up and say, I've got you. I'll do that tomorrow. I'll take care of that. Who's the contact? Go do what you need to do with your family. And I think we were able to do that for each other because we had built trust and because we had all of this common purpose. And because we were sharing so frequently, we actually knew what each other was working on. We were pretty familiar with those things. So it wasn't even really hard to pick up and to support that. And then in hindsight, when people have come back, we're in sort of year 2 of working together, and some are taking some time off and really reflecting on needing to be with family for some of those reasons. And so you see it as a result. I think you hear that, and we're certainly seeing that too.
Mm-hmm. maybe another aspect with this around this purpose topic. I mean, it's the individual perspective, of course, of what we bring in as individuals in the process. But you also mentioned the purpose on a company level for Siemens Energy.
Yes.
Did this relate to each other somehow, or was this more like a separate process when building the brand?
It's an interesting concept. I think for some it really did. So, I mean, our stated purpose for the company is to energize society. We feel a very big mission. And again, we don't make pens or pencils or, cups or whatever. We make electricity that makes the world run, right? So we already have a really big and a purpose that we're very proud of. And then when you talk about having to communicate that through a brand, then I think it gets pretty exciting, right? Because we have a creative aspect of doing that. We have the channel strategies of reaching out and making sure that our stakeholders understand how big we feel our purpose is and where we fit into their world and in the supply chain of the industry. So those were all parts of it. And then individuals on the team, if you just think about the brand team in particular, we had people who were storytellers, who had to go out and capture videos virtually. We had people who were storytellers in the sense of getting articles written or, pieces of content written, and really, and then others who were developing guidelines for the way that we would appear to the world and how our brand expression would be defined. And so I think everybody sort of really felt that way of needing to tell the world that story and having their personal role in doing that. And I think that was really critical.
And maybe that situation of on one hand being physically distant, and on the other hand, maybe even because of the distance, being more open than expected, helped to bring those together. The individual purpose, the company purpose, and the trust
And the
building.
pandemic. And yes,
Yeah.
and the pandemic. I think you
Yeah.
reflected on a moment when you couldn't do all the things you love to do and you suddenly lose those things. I think you also reflect on, am I working for a company I can be proud of? Am I working in a job I like? I mean, we're hearing so much now about what they're calling the Great Resignation, right?
Yeah,
Of people who are leaving because they're not happy in life, that they consider now life to be fragile or life to be potentially short, and they're not willing to do things that they don't want to do anymore. And I think that was an important part of when you're launching a company and you can talk and you're on purpose talking about your purpose to the world. It created a very sort of unifying sense of what we were here for, and a sense of pride in our work.
So one more reason to call last year the tipping year, as we did frequently already,
It's a great
because
way to look at it.
this is again another tipping point. Uh, and what you said brought me to it. People recognizing life as being more fragile than they thought, which it always was. It always was, but we lived
Right.
in a very stable situation from end of World War II until 2020, more or less. There was some financial crisis, but nothing that really was so existential like this one. And all of a sudden, we all had to re-recognize and to accept that life is fragile and that it can end every day, which again is, we all know that this can happen, but we put it somewhere in the very back of our heads and we don't want to know about it. And this started many things, including that one that ends in something that is called the Great Resignation, and which is probably one of the biggest challenges for companies ever.
Yeah. I mean, I know we're sort of a little off topic, but it brings me a bit of hope. I think if people can be happier in their lives, maybe we'll be nicer to each other. Maybe we'll be kinder. Maybe it'll be something that we can find. If we,
Yeah,
I just really hope. I hope so.
yeah,
I hope that's the
yeah.
outcome in the end, right? That we can, and we know we can work this way. We know we can work virtually, much more globally. I think we'll maybe have appreciation for cultures a bit more because we can actually experience them this way, whereas we wouldn't have unless you visit them once a year or twice a year if you have, reason to be in the Middle East, a reason to be in China, a reason to be somewhere else. And now we do this so much more, and we can experience and appreciate one another. So
I have
Yeah.
the
a
same
little bit of
feeling.
philosophy. Yeah.
I have the same feeling and the same hope that this tipping year with the need to reflect, hopefully changed enough people's minds in a way that the world may become a better place to be, or that people find ways to live happier than before. And by happier, I thought about the last album from Billie Eilish, which is called Happier Than Ever.
Uh-huh. Happier and healthier, right? Too. I think that's the other thing. We go, okay, we can't
Yeah,
have all these underlying conditions and then have, COVID-19. So
yeah, that's
yeah.
true.
Uh-huh.
And then with healthier, we are back again to energy because we all know that
Yeah.
electricity generation has to change in a way that climate doesn't change to an extent that this change harms people's health and living conditions. Yeah.
Yes.
And this is a very interesting topic, I think, and then it is another reason to be proud of if you work in such a company, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. In year one, our goal was to really create awareness for our new brand, to make sure people knew that we were a standalone, independent company. Yes, carrying the legacy of Siemens with us, but as a fresh perspective. In year two, we really want to create more familiarity with not just our purpose to energize society, but of our mission to be a decarbonization leader in our industry, and really try to work on helping people to become familiar with that work. It's not happening overnight. We know that we need to work on it over time. We know that even as we decarbonize, we need to make sure that we are creating a stable and reliable and even affordable supply of electricity. But nonetheless, I think that's really where the next sort of year two of our brand objectives are, which is exactly what you're talking about, is sort of framing that. And by the way, every competitor is trying to say the same things. So one of the things that we have to work on is I guess the proof points, putting our money where our mouth is and actually delivering on those things and creating that awareness and familiarity with what we're trying to do. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's quite interesting, because now we come back to the company level of the discussion, and you mentioned the mission is to be a decarbonization leader in this case. How did you come to this mission? Was it more like an internal driven? Was it like a purpose driven discussion, or did you also feel this coming from stakeholders, so that there are people more interested outside in this overall movement?
Of course, the whole energy transition is affecting all of us, from inside out and outside in. So I would that wouldn't be truthful if we said there was no outside influence. But I think there's our values as a company really are around trying to make a difference. This is not something we're sort of letting the world pressure us into. It's something that we feel like we really, as a leader, as with the breadth of experience and the breadth of the portfolio that we have, that we can really be not only an action leader, but a thought leader around this, and needing to be present in the discussions that are happening around the world, where this is true. And in not every country, but many, there's sort of different paces around the world, and helping them to do, and be an advisor for countries and politicians and companies out there that are trying to map this out for themselves in their own countries, and then sort of making sure that we can be a good partner for them and help them develop not just the technologies, but the way forward, and to sort of resolve and help them with all of the challenges around that, whether it be, staffing challenges or service challenges, or literally new technology challenges.
Is that reflected in the second part of your title, Head of Societal Engagement?
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that to light, because that's exactly what that means. We don't feel that our role is only as a supplier to the industry, but as a company in 190 countries with 65,000 employees, We feel an obligation to the societies and the communities where we live and work. And as an electricity provider or a company that makes energy or products that make energy, we know that we can make a big difference in those communities. And we've defined, in alignment with the UN SDGs, the 3 important pillars that we are active in. Those are being STEM education. We know we need to create the pipeline for the next generation of energy workers, and we're focused particularly on those underrepresented populations. So women, people with disabilities, and people of color. So we're also working on very specific initiatives around that. Climate research and climate projects that will help to move the needle on decarbonization is another area we want to work on. And then, of course, we've got to deal with disaster recovery because the climate is making disasters real. I mean, you all know in Germany, we had flooding, we've had really significant weather events all throughout this last calendar year. And we want to really focus on where those disasters are affecting electricity supply, and then work to help with recovery in those communities. So those are the 3 pillars that are important to us. And we will be, for the first time, giving employees up to 16 hours of time off to volunteer and work in their communities, to be a part of making it really happen, not just throwing money at it, but actually putting our hands and our talents and our resources at that as well. So that's something I'm really proud of. That is something where I feel like the company is really standing up and demonstrating that it intends to be a thought leader and make a difference.
Yeah,
that's great. And
yep.
Interesting also the aspect that you mentioned, the community, which I think is also then brings back actually the employees then in touch with the not only end customers but with society overall somehow. I mean, I think seems a huge opportunity then to connect these 2 points.
Yes, absolutely. You got 65,000 brand ambassadors, community leaders out there. We have many employees who are already active or who are even politicians in their own local communities, being active in their villages or in their towns all throughout the world. And so we want to be able to give them some time to do that and be catalysts in their communities for real change.
So the phrase "walk the talk" gets a whole new dimension.
I hope so. That's the intent.
If you make 65,000 walk the talk, that would be something. Do we have any ideas whether and how to measure that individual engagement?
The very first thing we'll do is track it. So we want to try to first just track how much time are we spending, where are we spending it, and if we are focused on spending it in those 3 particular pillars that I mentioned, then we'll be able to sort of understand impact anecdotally. And then eventually I think we want to put some more concrete measures around it. But I think first it's sort of just get out there and do it, and then figure out where that impact is.
I think that's really a great approach, because that then it gives a substance to whatever you say you do. Yeah, because you can tell anything. We all know that in nice words, and many do so. But the real decisive or differentiating thing is, how good are you in putting that to life?
And of course, we measure the strength of the brand at least once a year. In theory, you should see positive momentum from these kinds of activities. If we're doing it right and doing it in the places that have competitive context for us, then you should see those results in brand, awareness, familiarity, consideration, first choice. All of those things should continue to tick up if we're doing the right things.
Something that came up in my mind now is, how do you make the 65,000 start to walk? Is that traditional comms activities, comms assets, or is it making managers talk to their people, or is it all of it? Just curious.
It's really all of it. I would say for a lot of the employees at Siemens Energy, we've been through a lot of change over the last decade or so. So first, it starts with building some trust in the new leadership team, because they're asking for change, and of course, the employees are going to be potentially cynical at first. So I think it's demonstrating and having the leadership walk the talk. And so we're doing a lot to enable leaders, not just literally the board, but trying to enable leaders to give them the tools, the messages, the support they need to be able to demonstrate the values of the company. I think the other thing would be that, certainly traditional communication means are a part of it, but we've also realized that there's been a lot that we've been throwing at them this year. Think about everything that you have to tell a new employee about the new company they work for, from policies and procedures, new platforms that they've got to learn, new programs that we're introducing, new ways of doing performance reviews, literally everything, right? So then on top, you're telling them what our values are. On top, we're telling them we want you to go out and volunteer in the communities during a pandemic. So there were some things we had to sort of slow down with and really take our time with and make sure that we do them one building block at a time. I would tell you that we're certainly probably not where we need to be, where we want to be to engage and move 65,000 people to be the brand ambassadors. We hope that they will be, or feel that they hope they feel proud enough of the company. But we're keeping at it and continuing to work on it. And I think we're in a good way are sort of focused, which is an important part of it, because for year one, there was just so much we had to do out of legal obligation to communicate. And now we really get to sort of focus on the really important things. And that'll be an important part of year two.
If we would have asked you in February 20 or in March 20, when it was already clear that there will be a pandemic, if we would have asked you at that time, will you be able to do it? What would you have said? What would you have said then?
Let me answer it this way. In March, we all thought we'd be out of the office for about a month. So in March, I probably would have said, sure, we can do this. We'll work here. We'll work from home for a month or whatever.
Yeah.
By April, we were all going, can we do this? We have 5 months left. We're not going to be together. How can we really do this? And there were certainly moments where we asked ourselves those questions. But the board made it clear that they believed in us, not just the brand, they believed in the whole company. Everybody had to do exactly the same thing. The board made it very clear that they were committed to a September 28th launch, that they believed that we could do it. They gave us the clear direction on what the priorities were, and we were able to act on those. So after a couple of weeks of maybe being more than just a little concerned that we could do it, we were able to sort of regroup and really sort of figure it out. And I'm proud of the whole company, but especially of my team, that we were able to turn the world purple in just short months.
I would guess, and you can confirm or say bullshit. I think that one of the success factors in such a situation really is that concerning how to get things done, there is not much time to think about. You reflect, of course, you reflect about things, but about other things. But when you are in a situation when you have to use new channels, new ways, and all that stuff, and the time is short, you don't think too much about how to do it. You just find ways to do it. Yeah, very focused, and that maybe is something that in normal times hinders us to be as quick as we are in times of crisis.
Yeah, we really only had, we had a very clear deadline, right? September 28th was going to come whether we were ready or not. So that's one. I would say as well, we had a very short period of time where we had to adjust some strategies. We would have done some more things in person to launch the brand. We would have celebrated with employees in a different way. So we had to shift gears a little bit from what some of the activation plans that we had were. to creating virtual experiences. We didn't know until the very last minute that we would be allowed on the stock exchange with a very small group. So there were some things there that we had to be kind of flexible with, but everything else, yeah, we had to create the list and just go do it. And as I said before, in some ways, having a pandemic gave us the time too. We weren't, consumed or distracted by very much else in our life. So we had the time to go ahead and really act on those things. And we worked hard, and again, as you know, history is what it is. So we were able to do it, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
So.
That's great. So maybe one final almost aspect from my side. We talked a lot about the employees, the society part. I'm also wondering a bit how did the customers perceive this? How was the journey for customers, and how did you cover these the brand aspects? In these direct relations.
Thank you. Yes, we actually, that's a good point, because they're the ones that bring the paychecks in, right? So in the end, they're the ones that are paying the bills. So we did a lot actually during the pandemic to communicate, not just even so much about launching the brand itself, but we did some branding without branding it purple or branding it with brand expression or whatever, but just about helping them to keep the lights on, that we were here for that. We were here to help them meet the challenges of today. That regardless of what we were doing as a company, we weren't distracted by that mission. And that really paid off. So when we got to launching the actual brand and the brand experience with logos and colors and messaging that was designed to be sort of on brand, they were already listening, which was also an interesting aspect. Not for the pandemic, maybe that wouldn't have actually been the case. So.
Yeah, and that underlines one of the other theses that Hartmut and I have, that communications of a company is not just corporate communications. There is a lot more, and if you as a comms advisor do a good job, then you will be able to give the right impulses, to be a catalyst for such things, and then the traditional comms work follows, and then it all fits into each other, and then you have the biggest effect you can have.
That's a great point, because one of the things that I'm constantly educating the organization on is the brand is not the logo, and it's not purple, and it's not the design, and it's not even an advertisement. It is everything we do as a company shapes who we are as a brand. And when we fail to deliver, that shapes their impression of us. When we communicate off-brand, or when we solve a problem they didn't expect us to solve, or faster than we, those are all things that positively influence the brand. So it's one of the things I'm really trying to explain and share. I share the research quite broadly about where the brand gaps are and where we're performing quite well, so we can continue to strengthen the things that we're good at and close the gaps to the things that we need to, so that people know what the drivers are, and so that they can be contributing every day towards building our brand in a positive way.
I think that was a very great final statement to this 19th edition of the Communications Room Talk. It showed us how important communications, which is not only corporate communications, it is, what a strong lever it can be if used properly. So thank you very much, Melanie, for your insights. I'll give again a very final word to you, and then to Hartmut to close our session.
Well, thank you so much. It's really nice to reflect back on the trials, the tribulations, but especially the successes and what made us successful. So I appreciate the opportunity to do that. It's inspirational. It leaves me feeling good on this day. So thank you.
Yeah, then thank you, Melanie. Thanks, Mark. Thanks for all our visitors today. It's been a great session, and communication lives from the community that we all create, and from the individuals, from the employees, from the management, of course, from the society we interact with, and where we have a local impact, and the customers that we covered. So that's really a holistic picture. Thanks for creating that. Thanks for contributing to that, and see you again in the communications room next time. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.